Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a very special guest for you today. First of all, thank you for watching Lord Duncan's Rock and World. We've got a very special guest named Jon WIEDERHORN. He's a renowned author of several books about heavy metal, musicians, the music industry, everything else. Let's go ahead and grab Jon right now. And there is Mr. WIEDERHORN as we speak. Thank you for joining us, Jon, and much appreciated.
Thanks for having me, Lord Duncan.
And I just want to give a few credentials so people can see where they may have already read your work. Looks like you're author and co-author of at least 7 novels, probably more, I believe. You were also a writer for Rolling Stone magazine, Spin magazine, MTV, Guitar World, as well as Revolver. You're also, I believe, currently the host of a metal podcast called Metallology.
Yeah, it was called Backstaged, The Devil in Metal,
okay.
but that one, yeah, there's a 12-part series. They didn't continue it, but
sure,
it was a blast doing it. It's still up there.
All right. Well, straight from New Jersey, let me go ahead and grab a couple lists here of some of your books. Not in any particular order, but we've got I'm the Man, the story of that guy from Anthrax with Scott Ian. That one looks like one of my next ones I'm going to read. My Riot, the story of Agnostic Front. I obviously worked with Roger Moret on that one. I got to meet him. My band opened up for them one time. That's another story. Louder Than Hell, the definite oral history of metal. Another gem called Raising Hell, Backstage Tales. I've got that one right here. Another fine book. The one I like about that is it's in little sections. So if you take a break from it, you don't have to go back and retrace your steps, really. It's just going on from one subject to another with different artists and the different quotes from several interviews. Also got another one called United and Strong, also with the Roger Moret Nice Guy storybook that you helped him write. I believe he had Backstage Deal's Wild Ride from Heaven and Hell.
That was one of the podcast episodes, actually.
Okay. Then the other one was you did one called Backstage was Black Sabbath and the Rule of Evil. I'm looking forward to reading that one or listening to that one as well. So there's just to name a few of your many, many beautiful works. From New Jersey, originally from New Jersey?
No, originally from the DC area.
Oh, okay.
But, ended up in New York, and then when I met the wife, we had kids and ended up in a little bit of the suburbs here, although we're still about 15 miles from the city. So
cool.
Not
Yeah,
too far from
my friend Andy, my good friend Andy Ferraro, who met you the other day with his wife Kim, they are the DC, Virginia, working on a New York type area, and now living in Jersey while working on a New York type of deal. I remember at one point he was taking like a 4-hour train to get to work, but something to that effect. But so yeah, same kind of area, kind of bouncing around that area there. Let's see. So how did you get into rock and roll journalism? What got you all started? No, better yet, what got you into music to begin with?
Music to begin with. I think I was born into music.
Okay.
My mom used to say that I sang before I talked.
Really? Okay.
So yeah, always into music. And then when I discovered that there was something that was louder than the Beatles and the Beach Boys, although the Beatles could get pretty loud and stand as probably the greatest band that ever lived. But yeah, then I discovered in my early, maybe preteens, Sabbath, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin. I had some dark-minded friends who pointed me on the path to rock and roll mayhem. So yeah, I guess 6th, 7th grade, I kind of opened up and started discovering, God, everything from Pink Floyd and Zappa to Led Zeppelin and Rush and Judas Priest.
Sure. Yep, I got into that. My first 2 influences were my parents had ABBA on 8-track in the old station wagon, and then I had a neighbor whose older brothers had all the Kiss records, or he was already over the Kiss thing. I guess high schoolers thought it was kind of cheesy, but us elementary kids thought it was great. so I got into Kiss.
Everybody I know got into music through Kiss. It's really funny.
Yeah,
I liked
pretty
Rock and
much.
Roll Over. I thought that was a crazy looking
Oh,
album cover.
I
And
got a giant
I
rug in
liked
the
the
other room.
band, but I was never in the Kiss army. I always had a kind of gravitation towards slightly heavier fare, and they seemed a little. I guess they were so huge at that point that
Oh
not that
yeah.
I'm like your underground elitist, but you know, at age 7. But hell, I loved Kissing the Phantom of the Park. Who didn't?
Oh, right. I
But I
remember.
didn't see them until much later.
Sure, I remember maybe third grade. My mom came to me and said, "A lot of the other parents are really worried about kids listening to this band. This whole nights kids in Satan's service." Da, 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 da. I'm like, "No, mom." And I don't even know what the lyrics mean. I don't care. I just like the music. And she's like, "Okay, that's cool."
Doesn't it stand for Keep It Simple, Stupid?
Exactly. There you go. Perfect. That. I'm sure Gene would claim credit for that. Keep it simple, stupid. There you
He
go.
takes credit for everything else. He
That's right.
invented the devil horns.
Yeah, he said he
And
did that. I'm pretty sure it was Dio, but whatever.
yeah, Dio could.
I like to say Dio did it.
Oh, he
Um,
did.
So then, how did you get into doing journalism as well?
Well, I always liked to write, and you know, I in high school I wrote for the school paper a little bit. I wanted to write about music, and they let me do a little bit of that, but really wanted me to do more hardcore reporting. And more than anything else, all of the people at the high school paper went to the printer and got involved in the kind of hands-on. I didn't want to do that. I was like, no, I want to write. I want to write about, you know, rock bands and people. So the professor, don't know what he was thinking. He decided that some people should be staff and some people should be freelance. So I was essentially fired from my high school paper. And I was like, fuck that. I'm not going to be a freelancer. I'm, you know, freelance in high school. What's that? No one's getting paid to do anything here. So I spent more time playing guitar than writing about anything at that point. He almost turned me off to journalism, but
Wow.
then I went to a school of communications at Boston University, which had an excellent journalism program, and I found a way to mix my love for music with my interest in writing, and everything just clicked. I excelled at the university and with the school paper. And then in my senior year, first semester, I did a semester abroad in England with a internship program that my school had, and they hooked me up at Melody Maker, which was a real breakthrough. It's funny because I wanted to work for Kerrang, but someone else had that gig. I was like, oh, because that's the metal mag.
Right.
Yeah. But they actually hooked me up at History Today magazine, and I had news writing experience, but didn't want to work for History Today. So I went to my peer advisor, and he's like, well, let me see what I can do. And thank God they got me in at Melody Maker, and really the rest was history because they let me string for them. So I reviewed Faith No More concerts in London. I reviewed what else did I review? Oh, the Coroner's No More Color album, because no one there liked metal. So, you know, I was like, hey, this is a pretty cool thrash record, and it's, you know, and they're like, yeah, go for it, go ahead. And then when I got back to the States,
for metal, yeah.
When I got back to the States, they let me freelance for them, which was a big thing. And, you know, back then it was the 90s, and alternative rock was just kind of becoming loud and coming to the foray. Nirvana, who were really discovered in London before they broke in the States, were huge at that point. Well, no, it was Bleach was out. So they were a big buzz band, but it was such a great time to be a music journalist.
88, yeah.
And you know, the British magazine was really happy with any cool American bands I could bring them. And then I got into American magazines like Raygun and Alternative Press, and you know, eventually climbed up the ladder to Rolling Stone. But it was all very incremental. You know, it was a matter of being really determined that this is what I wanted to do, and I wasn't going to take no for an answer.
That's awesome. And see, you just segued into my next question, which was going to be, what was your first article for Rolling Stone, and how were you nervous, being the fact that it was so legendary, and And I assume you remember what your article was about, or who it was about?
Oh yeah, I was insanely nervous. Yeah, they had me. I pitched a whole bunch of stuff. I had met a couple of the editors there at a kind of industry gathering thing, and one of them knew my stuff from Melody Maker, so I was lucky enough to get a shot. I got to interview Caius, who the desert Palm Springs desert band, and they liked the kind of angle I had on the story, that there was this whole scene of bands emerging from the deserts in California, and they brought these generators out into the desert and turned them on and created these huge parties, and had these great parties of and of course Caius members ended up forming Queens of the Stone Age years later, so it really evolved into something very cool. But I was really excited about getting that story, and nervous as hell. But it was one of those things where you have the opportunity. I wasn't going to blow it, so I just kind of got through the anxiety and worked my ass off on it.
If you can pretend you're not nervous and just pretend like you got everything covered, then you can at least trick yourself into thinking, "Hey, I got this covered as well."
Yeah, sure. After a few shots and throwing up in the toilet.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt.
Yeah. No, I was sober when I wrote it, but it was a great experience. They liked the story, and they were really welcoming, which was really cool for me, because it's hard to break into a place like that. I mean, before then I'd been at like all these magazines that don't exist anymore, like Tower Pulse, which was Tower Records magazine, and they had me do their metal column, and lots of artist interviews. So I had the chops to write about musicians and interview them. Everything kind of clicked.
Nice. Let's see. I was going to say, you got any notable interviews that still blow your mind to this day, that you actually got to interview that person or band?
That's a kind of story that's a kind of question where suddenly your head goes blank, and it's like, wow. I interviewing Metallica was a blast. I was for Guitar World. I was sent over to San Francisco and interviewed them when the Load album came out, which wasn't one of their greatest record, but it had its moments for sure. I'm sorry, it was Reload, so it wasn't even Load. It was part 2 of Load.
Well, they both had at least a couple decent songs. I know. At least they both had.
Yeah, they were written at the same time too. They just didn't finish Reload. And I remember they used Andres Serrano's artwork for both. And he made these sort of abstract designs using milk, blood, and sperm. And James Hetfield thought it was disgusting. But Lars Ulrich, who's the artsy collector, was all into it, as with Kirk Hammett. So I remember talking to James, and he's like, "Yeah, we have to use that guy's art for the second album too, because they're bookends, but I don't like it."
Sure. We'll leave it to Lars, the German or Austrian, to like the creepy. They're a little ahead of their time when it comes to creepy stuff. But either way, let's see here. So, what have you learned from the industry after covering it all these years? Any major thing you wish you could have told yourself when you first started out?
Be careful what you ask for.
Right.
Only in retrospect. I mean, I've had a 30-year run. It's been amazing. I've got to, meet some really great musicians and do some really insightful kind of interviews, write books. But now the industry is just it's a hard place. You've really got to want to be a part of it if music's got to be your calling, and above all else, because it's not really a financial boon right now. It's very tough to get good book deals. It's tough to get in. There are no magazines anymore, so really, you'll get out of journalism school and be writing for websites for $75 an article. So it's even harder now than when I broke in, and it was tough then.
I was at the Art Institute of Colorado for music, video, and business in like September of '92, and I remember the first week there, they came with this piece of paper that says, "We don't want you. We don't need you. We've got enough people in the music industry already. Please just give up your dream right now and don't go any farther. Just quit. We don't need you. We don't." And there was like 300 people in my class. I was one of the 36 that graduated.
Wow. But, you know, it's the really resourceful people, the creative people who find other ways to take advantage of the opportunities that technology has provided, and, you know, webcasts and or podcasts and YouTube channels and all kinds of alternate possibilities have surfaced, enabling people to have careers in the field. But you really have to stay on top of what's going on with social media, and there's lots of juggling. And, you know, almost everybody I know who's been in the field for a long time has kind of bounced from place to place and then risen back up. But, you know, editors don't stick around forever. Magazines, websites don't stay around forever. So there's this stick-to-itness that you've really got to have in order to kind of make this. And I wouldn't say even you have to have super thick skin, because I don't. I'm crushed by every every defeat. But it's that resolve to get back up and, you know, fight the next fight.
Never say die. Yeah. Well, you were saying how there's no magazines. I had an uncle actually got me a subscription to Playboy, but of course, the first issue was the first one that didn't have any nudity in it. Now I'm like thinking, boy, that is one sick joke of a Christmas gift.
That's actually funny, because I wrote for a couple of years before the internet for Penthouse. And, it was during a time where the internet had just started. It was surfacing, and there was an awful lot of smut on it. And to compete and, you know, not go under, Penthouse had to get really graphic. So it turned into like a Beyond Hustler almost. You know, it wasn't just photos anymore. It was like pornography. But they did hire writers and paid well, and did some, you know, really in-depth articles. And I got some really cool features for the magazine. I did a huge piece on Korn, and I did a big piece on South Park. Although it's not metal, but right when they were starting, that was totally fun. I had a great editor there who gave me lots of cool work. And then, you know, unfortunately, they also fell prey to the can't pay writers anymore syndrome.
Yeah. Do you get to cover the porn awards or anything like that?
Everybody says, "Oh, did you meet the girls? Did you meet?" No, I was sitting in my home office, and you know, didn't meet anybody. Met the editor, but the editor was an old school, you know, cigar chomping news journalist who just happened to be there because there was a paycheck in it. And they had a lot of, you know, very non-porn industry folk at the magazine. It was a living, I guess, a gig.
Sure. Well, not meeting the girls, at least you didn't have to get penicillin shots from time to time.
Yeah, right. That's one of the magazines I wrote for that my wife didn't brag about me.
Sure. So what is different about writing an article for, say, a magazine versus an actual novel?
Well, you know, you're a novel or an autobiography?
Well, I guess novel.
Because I haven't written a whole lot of fiction.
Okay.
It's I love great writers.
I guess I should say more autobiography versus just like an article for a magazine, whereas a book probably has a little more detail and way more cliff notes and all that.
Well, I mean, it often one stems from the other. The Scott Ian book, I hooked up after having interviewed him probably 10 times for magazines and websites over the years, and then having him write the intro to the book I co-wrote with Kathleen Turman called Louder Than Hell, which was my first book and kind of the biggest or most widely acclaimed book I've done to date. But after writing the intro, I sent it to him like, hey, you know, what do you think of this? And for it, I interviewed him and then used his words to create a a good intro for the book, a foreword, in which he told stories about how he discovered metal and his upbringing. And so I'm sending it for his approval. He's like, man, this sounds like I wrote it. This sounds like me talking. I'm like, well, Scott, I mean, it is your talking. I interviewed you. I recorded the conversations. I kind of fixed the language a little. He's like, no, I love it. This is great. This sounds just like me. It's like, well, that's awesome. I'm stoked. Hey, have you ever thought of doing a book? And he's like, I kind of have, and I've never really taken that next step. And I asked him if he wanted to work with me on it, and that's how most of these opportunities kind of come up.
Sure.
So that's and the same thing happened with Al Jourgensen, although that was just a matter of interviewing him for Louder Than Hell, as well as many different magazines over the years. And it's so funny. One of the magazines I interviewed him for, I was asking him to tell me crazy stories about his drug-addled youth. Not youth; he was on drugs until his 30s. But he's got these insane stories. He's a master storyteller, and because he's been through everything. So he's saying, all right, I can tell you some stuff, but it's got to be off the record. I'm like, okay, He's like, and you know what, man, you should come to my place in Texas, and you can't write about anything, but you can stay here with us, and I'll tell you anything you want to know, man. And we'll have a blast. We'll drink and we'll smoke weed. It'll be great. I was like, well, I've got a little baby, my newborn at home. Don't think my wife would be real happy with me taking a vacation to Austin, Texas. Right. It was not San Antonio. Anyway, he was up by the Mexican border in Texas, where he lived for years before he went to LA. And I said, man, the minute you tell me that I can write about your stories and we'll do a book together, I'm there. And he's like, all right, yeah, let's do that. And that was an experience, man. I mean, I'd already been a huge Ministry fan, and I knew he was, somewhat crazed. He was off heroin at that point, off most drugs except weed, and he was heavily drinking, although he's quit that now too. But with his wife as a manager, who sadly no longer, well, she's not with him there. She's alive, but he wishes she wasn't. They had an ugly separation, but while they were together, she kind of made everything happen. So she'd make sure the interviews happened. He'd be drunk as hell all day long. Finally, he'd get sober enough so he could be lucid and tell stories. And it was just a blast. I mean, it's 2 weeks that just went by in this insane blur, and thank God I had a recorder to capture the anecdotes and the stories. But that's one of my favorite books. It's Ministry, the Lost Gospels according to Al Jourgensen. And sure. Since he was so in a daze for much of his career, he doesn't remember a lot of the particulars, and he kind of has created his own history to a certain extent. So there's loose ends where maybe he doesn't remember something, so he'll embellish, which is, we had to go back and most of it's self-deprecating, and it's about him. So it's really not a question of, is this story going to get him in trouble if it didn't happen? But I called it the world according to Al, or the Lost Gospels according to Al Jourgensen, to imply that this is his idea of his life and his story. And then I went in and interviewed his dad and some of his band members and people who he'd played with or been in relationships with, to get their side of the equation, which didn't always coincide with his. And it's not at all a confrontational book. It's really just a wild roller coaster ride through this person who's lived this, like a cat.
We wouldn't have any of those stories. Half the stories or any of those stories or the music if it hadn't been for Lorne Michaels, right?
Lorne Michaels with Ministry.
Lorne Michaels had saved him from. He was going to go to jail for drugs, but Lorne Michaels.
Maybe Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary sort of took him as under his wing.
I could have sworn I read that in the Raising Hell book, and and Lorne Michaels knew somebody and can help convince the judge not to send him in jail because he just gotten signed to a record deal. Maybe I got it mixed up with somebody else.
It wasn't Lorne Michaels. I know they didn't really have any connection. But
who knows?
It's certainly possible that someone in a high place somewhere helped keep him out of jail. And I can't remember every word from that book because there were a lot of them. But they were. He lived a crazed life, avoided jail numerous times, largely by luck. Sometimes by being a celebrity, you tend to do your public service announcements and make your amends. But yeah, what a character!
Oh, I bet. I got to see him, but I saw him like 3 times. I got to see. I think I saw Psalm 69 twice because I lived in Denver. A lot of tourists came through Denver twice. Usually big beginning and towards the end. And then, of course, my favorite, which was Filth Pig, except for somebody getting ran over by a car right after the show. Literally outside the venue, getting hit by a car and laying there as we walked by. That was a little creepy, but...
It was funny. I hated that album. I reviewed it for Rolling Stone, trashed it, and he hated. He was so pissed that I trashed that record. I think it was just kind of a... Yeah, I know. He kept telling you got to go back to it. You got to listen to it again. You got to listen to it again. And after I gave it a really nasty review in Rolling Stone, having been a huge fan of the band. This is before I did the book, but for a long time,
anything after Psalm 69 is pretty hard to frickin' top. But I frickin' thought it was great. Every damn song, Crumbs, Lava. Lay Lady Lay, the Dylan cover.
Yeah, there were a couple
Welcome
covers
to
on
the
there,
Fall.
Welcome to Fall.
I thought it was great. Intense. I don't know, maybe it's I don't know, I guess I just really got into that one in particular, so maybe that's why. But I first heard them when I worked at a record store in Minneapolis called Positively 4th Street, which is now, I believe, an Electric Fetus. And somebody had it on when we were still selling cassettes. And there was a cassette of it, and it had a little cutout. So at the end of the month, I was going to get to keep it. Sure enough, I got to have my copy of The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste on cassette. You will not kill.
Oh, I thought that's where I discovered them, with The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste.
Sure.
And then that was mind-blowing to me. And I got into it because Kirk Hammett was plugging them in some interview, and I'm like, Ministry, what's that? And a friend of mine happened to pick up a cassette. I'm like, oh, I got to check this out. And that's how I discovered industrial music and industrial metal, and then went into all sorts of other industrial types of music, and got into Einstürzende Neubauten and KMFDM and lots of the German groups and some of that stuff, even Throbbing Gristle, just making some really far out wild noise and turning it into some sort of art, I found really appealing. It was really the underground stuff, I guess, that drew me in. And that was, I guess, something that stemmed from my love for thrash music, which started as a completely underground music form. Motley Crue and then Rat and Poison were on the air. And I was like, I hate this crap. It's like, well, I love the first 2 Crue albums, but I have a soft spot for Doc. But I thought, man, Metallica, wow, this is twice as fast or 3 times as fast. It's like Motorhead, combining all these new wave of heavy metal, new wave of British heavy metal influences, and no one knows who they are. Ha ha ha. That led me on a crusade to discover Slayer and Venom and Exodus. And once you're, I think, on that metal path to extremism, you don't go back. It's like, okay, what's heavier than this? Death metal. Death metal's crazy. I can barely, tell what's going on until I listen to it 30 times. What's heavier than that? Oh, black metal. Man, some of these guys actually killed one another, So it's it was an interesting ride. I was always kind of searching for that next bolt of lightning.
Sure. Well, speaking of, I got to see 6 Feet Under along with Internal Bleeding. About halfway through the show, about 30 police officers came in and they just started batting people over the head and arresting people. It was just the craziest thing. Like, I thought I was in the middle of a movie or something.
Right.
I was like,
Well,
what's going on here?
back in the, looks like you were, in the scene kind of when I was. And back in the day, these shows weren't really safe havens. I mean, they were hardly war zones. But you go to a Jesus Lizard show, and you are going to see some crazy shit. And, good chance that David Yao, the wild vocalist who spent half of his show in the mosh pit or surfing, would end up knocked out by the end of it, or bleeding, and there was a certain vicarious thrill to that, because you just didn't know it was going to happen, and it wouldn't be predictable. Sometimes the show would go up in flames, not literally, but they'd be horrible, and sometimes your mind would explode. But it wasn't this predictability that rock and roll has kind of evolved into with the commodification of so much of the music. When it was still underground and there were indie labels, I'm like, get off my lawn, I'm a grandpa, and things were better when we were kids. But it was a different world then, and it was exciting. I mean, I'm sure kids today find the music scene exciting too. And
back in my day, we had guitar solos in our songs.
I know. I remember the first time I heard Saint Anger. I was at MTV, and I was brought over to those executive suites at Elektra to listen to, and I'm like, wow, this sounds really rough and unproduced. Is this this is not unmastered, right? No, this is the mastered copy. Yeah, but there's going to be more engineering. No, but they're going to overdub solos, aren't they? No, this is it. There's not one solo on that record.
Yeah. Well, and he's playing that weird funky snare drum too.
Oh, the trash can lid. Yeah. Not their best produced album, but I appreciate it as a sort of art project, I guess.
Hey, was the first one with Trujillo, I think, wasn't it?
Was he in the band at that point? I guess he was. Yeah.
I think so. Right after leaving Suicidal Tendencies.
Yep.
Nice. Well, tell you what, let's jump into my little rapid fire here. I do got one more question coming up about some of this stuff, but I'll save it for the very end of that. I just got reminded when you're talking about Scott Ian and how the first time he met Lemmy's like, here, have some whiskey. And he'd never had whiskey before. And he learned really hard the next day that, I can't follow Lemmy's drink for drink. That is not a smart move.
No, he went all night partying with Lemmy. And he ended up, like, basically, first he was drunk and crazy, running down the street and diving into trash cans, and knocking them over just because he was an idiot. And then he was just throwing up with pretty much alcohol poisoning and had to take a flight to the next stop on the tour. So yeah, that's one of Scott's great stories.
Well, then I thought it was cute going from something like that to Michael Sweet talking about how we used to moon truckers and shoot the side of the truck with a BB gun. Ooh, you were such a rebel.
Yeah,
such a heavy metal rebel, you Michael Sweet.
Right.
Sometimes
everything has its degrees and kind of levels of intensity.
There we go. So, grew up in the East Coast area then?
Yeah, I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland.
Okay, so who's your sports teams? Any sports at all?
I was, as a kid, a diehard fan of the Washington Capitals, and the back when they were like the worst team in the league. They'd win 5 games, 10 games a year.
Sure.
And fond memories of my dad taking me to those. Big fan of the Orioles. Big fan of the Washington. Can I call them Redskins? They were at the time.
They were then. I always thought they could have actually even kept the logo if they just would have changed the name to the Washington Warriors. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. It was a pretty woke era.
Yeah.
But it's funny, many years later, I kind of, after high school, I kind of abandoned my love for sports because I was so into music. Sure. And both require an intense amount of dedication. And then my wife never wanted to be with anybody who loved sports. So I kind of avoided sports. Even when the Yankees played the Mets in the World Series, I was oblivious to it. Then we had a kid who's a diehard sports fan. So when he turned 8, I had to start following the Yankees to bond with him. And now we watch games all the time again.
Got my sports back. Woo!
Yeah, it's
Yeah, because
funny.
happy wife, happy life. You get it with whatever mama wants. You might as
That's
well
what they
do that.
say. Well, she wanted me to bond with him, but she's really not too happy when I'm turning on a Rangers game and he's off at college.
How about a couple of favorite concerts and or guilty pleasure? My guilty pleasure, of course, would be ABBA. But any kind of favorite concerts you got to see?
Yeah, I got to see Metallica headline at I think it was a Seagull Inn in Baltimore. It might have been a different venue, but they were headlining. Armored Saint was the first band on, and then Wasp was second. And
Nice.
that was a pretty great show, and turned me on to Metallica in a big way. I was more a Wasp fan before it,
Sure.
and then I was like, wow, Metallica can really deliver live. So that was a pretty great moment.
How about favorite food?
Favorite food? Oh wow. I like nothing super spicy, but I love Italian. I guess
There you
who
go.
can go wrong with Italian?
Sure.
So calamari, good chicken parm, good seafood.
Anything ricotta, I'm happy.
Yeah.
How about dream vacation or maybe a nightmare trip or a dream vacation you'd like to hit one someday?
Dream vacation. I traveled an awful lot in my 20s and 30s, which was really exciting. So before I had my kids, my wife and I did an awful lot of travel to Europe.
Okay. So probably
And our honeymoon.
Staying home is probably ideal then.
Yeah. Well, our honeymoon was great. We went to she's a huge fan of Greece. So we went to Athens and then to some of the islands. We went to Santorini and Mykonos, and then we went to Turkey. So we went to Istanbul and spent a few days there, and then went to some of the other big cities, Cappadocia, and that was a wild experience. It was pretty great.
Nice. I would think of They Might Be Giants when I hear Istanbul. Was once
Yeah.
Istanbul was once
Constantinople.
It's no one business but the Turks. So I was in a lot of really goofy stuff in high school besides metal. So there you go.
But that's what's great. You know, I all my best friends hated metal, and I liked a whole bunch of stuff besides metal. And
Sure.
even to this date, I'm such a sucker for, like, maybe because I was in England on an internship, but Britpop, love the stuff. You know,
Sure.
love Oasis and the Stone Roses, and then that got me into shoegazing music, which is like my
Right.
passion. Like My Bloody Valentine, who are almost a metal band, really. But
my first gig while I was still going to school at the Arts Institute was being a promotions assistant for the Bluebird Theater that had just been renovated. It had been a porn theater in the 70s and it got renovated in the early 90s. And the first big show they had there was some band named Oasis. So I was going around. I was the flyer boy putting up flyers for some band named Oasis. Didn't know a freaking thing about them.
awesome.
I think maybe the first song maybe had been out, but I was still oblivious to it. But that was my first flyer gig was for Oasis.
Going back to Melody Maker, that was the first show I reviewed in the States. Well, no, it's not, but it was Oasis's first U.S. show. They played at a New York club called the Wetlands, and I was like, "What's this band all about?"
Denver's was the Bluebird, probably holds 2,000 people, maybe.
Yeah, it's crazy. And now they're playing stadiums, Madison Square Garden.
Oh yeah, yep,
unbelievable.
And Minnesota United Football Club, the Loons, after every victory, the fans in the stands, they sing the entire, they sing Wonderwall, the entire song all the way through, the whole thing, not just one verse, the whole damn song. So your first job, maybe a first job when you were a young kid, something maybe you hated or you're glad to either quit or move on from?
Well, first real job, which was horrible, was working in Woolworths as a stock kind of boy / janitor, which
Nice.
I just wanted to have some spending money to buy albums. Before that, I wanted to buy video games and albums, and I delivered newspapers for years in junior high and high school.
Sure.
and woke up at ungodly hours of 6 in the morning. And I still have nightmares occasionally that I'll step outside of the house and there's a stack of newspapers there. And I'm like, oh no, I forgot to deliver the papers.
I did the same thing. And luckily here in Minnesota, when it was really cold and nasty out, luckily my dad would get up and drive me around in his car. Cool. If it was really, really cold, because I couldn't ride my bike. The streets would be covered in snow.
Yeah.
And it was a small little town, so it only took maybe a half hour anyway. But how about golf, bowling, billiards, or darts?
Wow. I'd say darts, because you can have a few beers at the bar, and no one takes it seriously anyway, so you don't have to be especially good.
That's true. I think people take bowling a little too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
How about your first car?
First car, that would have been a Honda Civic, and my parents bought it for me. No, I'll take it back. They gave me a beaten up Volvo, old. I mean, I was lucky to have it, but
Sure.
the transmission died while I was driving it. This was in high school, and it was their old car, like their third or fourth generation old car. My mom swore by Volvos because she had been a nurse, and they were, at the time, they were built like tanks. So
you're not a steal.
If I was going to be in an accident, she wanted me to be behind the wheel of a Volvo. And so I had this blue trashy old Volvo that I ran the wheels off of.
Nice. How about, you got any pets or tattoos?
Well, I've got one tattoo. It's really kind of pathetic, but at least it's kind of the,
hey, there you go.
Industry. It's got a little Stratocaster.
It's to the point right there, man.
That was my midlife crisis. My wife got an airplane and I got a Strat. And I got a dog who I love to death, and he thinks he's a Doberman, but he's really a Shih Tzu.
Okay. My dad's got a Shih Tzu upstairs, and I've got a little something somewhere around here. Daisy Lee! Daisy! Maybe she'll come running.
Charlie, come here. Charlie!
Daisy!
He's like, something's up. He's like, I'm not coming there. Come here, buddy. Oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Come here. You're going to be on camera. Look at this. Look at that face.
Look at the
puppy. Look at that. He's got one, too.
You see the puppy? Look, right there.
Everyone thinks he's a puppy. He's 13. So
oh, I know.
He just never grew terribly large.
She's like 1.5 or 2, and it's all she's going to be.
It's adorable.
My last dog was a real big dog, so I'm welcome the small one.
Yeah. No, they're all great, but yeah, these
nice.
It's a great breed. They think they're big dogs.
You got any favorite movies?
Lots. Love movies, but I would say Shawshank Redemption is the one that I'll always watch when it's on television.
I was gonna say, I just stop what I'm doing and I watch it no matter where it's at.
Yeah, exactly.
Preferably it's right when he's already escaped. And it's where the warden throws the rocks to the poster.
Like, Barbarella.
He just got up like a fart in the wind and blew away. And then the rest on is the best.
Many great lines in that.
I still tear up at the end when I see Red drop his suitcase and they run and hug. I tear up every single time.
Yeah, beautiful movie. I didn't realize it was a Stephen King story. Actually.
Yeah, isn't that sick? Same with the Green Mile.
Green Mile, yeah. No,
and Stand By Me as well.
Yeah, Stand By Me for sure, because that was based directly on a short story, I think. He did our novella. But yeah, love Shawshank.
Okay, I got 2 more for you.
Okay.
So you're dead. You're now a ghost. Who do you haunt or hang out with who's either living or dead?
Who do I hang out with? Wow.
And whether they don't have to know about it. If you want to be secretive, like me, I'm going to be a stalker and hang out with Salma Hayek. But
okay.
Or you could
do whatever
you want.
She's still alive.
She's still alive. She doesn't have gray skin yet.
I don't know. I might get in trouble here, but my celebrity crush, Sarah Silverman, I'd probably
Oh, okay.
hang out with her for
I
a
like
while.
her. I like her too.
She's
She's cool.
vicious and irreverent and funny, and wouldn't touch her in an unseemly way, but just love
Sure.
to be a fly on the wall with her for
I
a
just
little
the
little
character
while.
she does in A Million Ways to Die in the West, when the boyfriend's like, "Hey, maybe we could finally do it one of these times," and she's like, "Oh, I'm a woman of virtue. We got to wait till we're married," even though she just got done doing 10 guys earlier in the day.
Right.
How
Yeah.
about okay? Well, here I was gonna say the best for last. You got any Lemmy stories?
Lemmy stories. Oh man. I mean, I never drank with the guy, but I did interview him several times.
Like at the
And
Rainbow or where?
uh no, once they were in New York, so and unfortunately just kind of boring label conference room sort of stuff. But no, I do have a good Lemmy story. I did a story for Revolver magazine. It was a cover story on all the members of this tour. It wasn't Mayhem, but it was one of these tours, the return of something or other. It was Judas Priest, Motorhead, um, Heaven and Hell. Okay, it was a Heaven and Hell tour. They headlined, right? So they were all there, and I got to do a round table interview with all of them and Lemmy. And Lemmy was agreed. He was super late. He would only show up if there was a limo to pick him up. So he finally shows up and rolls in. First thing he does, he walks over to the table before greeting anyone, picks up a bottle of Jack and a Coke, has a big kind of a solo glass, a cup, I guess, pours probably 8/9 of the cup full of whiskey, puts a tiny little bit of Coke on it, slams it, does another one, drinks that, not quite as fast, and then he starts talking to people, and he is the nicest, most sociable, coolest dude in the world, and a great interview with stories about Hendrix and stories about Hawkwind and stories about the beginning of Motorhead, and when Filthy the Animal Taylor was on acid and tried to climb through a mirror and ended up smashing his face into it, and Lemmy taking his bass and conking someone in the head when they were spitting at him, which now you'd end up in jail for, but at the time it was just punk rock. And I think some of the stories certainly ended up in Louder Than Hell. I know we got him in there.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a one of a kind. He lived it absolutely like he sounded. He wasn't. There was nothing artificial about that guy. He was total rock and roll.
Well, I'm fortunate. I've got to see them several times in every tour, sometimes twice in Denver. So starting, I guess my first tour was the Sacrifice tour, but then I saw him every time after that. So very, very lucky to have seen him.
Yeah, he was a great performer.
Shoot, I can't think of what it was now. You were just talking about it. Oh, and he probably had a little pocket full of speed right here too.
No doubt.
A little mess of that here and there.
I do have a friend who was offered speed by him, and it wasn't just small amounts. It was like giant rocks.
Oh, right. Oh, I know what it was. Yeah, because wasn't he like a roadie for Hendrix as
He
well?
was a roadie for Hendrix. He would get Hendrix's drugs. So he was, in addition to helping Hendrix with his gear, he would go collect drugs for Jimmy before he went on.
And there was somebody else they read about who they wanted to see Hendrix, so they just picked up an amp and some cables and started carrying it in. Then one of the other main roadies said, "Hey, you kid, come over here." But I forget about who it was. Maybe it was I forget who it was now. It was in I think it was in your book though. I just can't think of who it was who said that now. Well, either way,
I can't remember either. So
well,
if it was my book, I should.
This is one of them right here called Raising Hell. This is the man we're right here, John WIEDERHORN. I recommend his books. Go check them out. Also on Amazon, I assume, and everywhere else. I'm sure you can find books.
Can I plug my latest
absolutely
book?
Let's do it right now. In fact, I will add it on the screen here when we're done here as well.
Oh, you have it up? Do you have an image? So, because I was going to hold them up.
I'll have to do it in post production here, but I'll make sure it
Okay.
pops up on the screen.
Sure, sure. I have a copy here. This isn't it. This is this one was louder than hell. That was my 750-page introduction into the world of.
I got a picture of that in several of them in the intro.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, I just did a book. Well, it just came out with Marty-Friedman, and
that's on there
Japanese.
Too.
And that was an amazing experience. He's an extraordinary guitarist. Of course, he was in Megadeth for 10 years, but the story beyond the sex, drugs, rock and roll, rise through the greatness of the metal scene. Part of that book, which is really interesting to me, is that after 10 years in Megadeth, he dropped everything and said, you know what? I'm going to Japan. I love Japan. I love J-pop music, and I'm going to play J-pop music over in Japan for a career. I was like, are you crazy? Like, he had no connections. He went over there, became a star guitarist with a ton of different J-pop artists.
Yeah, no one really knows like now. Like 10, I don't think anybody over here really knew anything about it until like the last.
No, they didn't. It's only he did a couple more recent albums and publicized what he had been doing over there. But he had 2 game shows or talk shows that he was on, which were variety shows with lots of skits and things. And he speaks fluent Japanese, so he was like this just wild man. If you get the chance to look it up on YouTube, Rock Fujiyama is one of his great shows, and he interviews all these people. There's one where he interviews Kerry King, and they play this game of name the riff. So there's they'll play 5 seconds of a riff, and the 2 of them are like, "Oh, it's UFOs, lights out," or whatever it happens to be.
What a great idea!
That's totally fun, and so he's lived this extraordinary life, and done a lot of J-pop, and then came back to metal, and his latest album is a bunch of metal ballads that's called Drama, that he put out last year. But he's a huge celebrity living in Tokyo, and he's married to the head. I think she's the head cellist of the Tokyo Philharmonic, and he was named an ambassador of Japanese culture, which is crazy for this kind of American shred guitarist. So he's got this really wild story, and it's kind of this 2-act thing. So it's not just his rock and roll life in America. The whole second part is in Japan. And I refer to it sort of as your favorite rock and roll biography crossed with Lost in Translation movie. So
sure, that's awesome.
And then I just finished a book which is coming out in the spring with a fellow named Derek Schulman, who was in the band Gentle Giant. If you're into prog rock, you might know them. They were contemporaries of Yes and Genesis and King Crimson, and had a solid 10-year run where they were signed to tons of different labels and did some pretty great proggy stuff. And then after he quit the band, he did a complete 180 and joined the music industry, and became one of the star A&R and record executive guys who became the VP of Polygram, signed Bon Jovi, signed Kingdom Come, signed Cinderella, not Cinderella. It was Cinderella, I think. And then he moved over to Atco, signed Pantera, which was a huge thing, was responsible for the comeback of AC/DC, signed Men at Work for their comeback album, which was, quite an accomplishment, because who knew they had a comeback album in them. So he's got this really interesting story, and he was clean and sober through the whole thing. And he has these stories of everyone else at these labels being completely decadent and debauched, trying to lure him to work for them by having him, by offering him blow and prostitutes and all this. He's like, no,
that's all it take for me.
Yeah, it's just crazy. So anyway, that's coming out in the fall, and it's called Giant Steps, and it's really
Giant Steps. Okay, very nice. Well,
that takes us to the present.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. That takes us to the present, as far as my books go.
Good, very nice. That must have been the one that Andy was getting when he met you the other day.
No, he was actually getting the Marty Friedman book. He got a signed.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it looks great. Even really cool cover too, actually.
Oh, the cover is amazing. They did a great job with that.
Well, hell, dude, I think I'm about ready to wrap it up. Any closing words or words of wisdom you like to share with the little kiddies out there in rock and roll land?
No, just stay true to yourself, keep it metal, and don't put the blinders on. If you want to explore things outside of metal, it didn't used to be cool. Like if you liked punk and metal, someone would beat you up. But the good thing about I guess Spotify and today's society is that it seems to be very acceptable to like all kinds of music, and I'm all for that. I think
there you go.
The more you experience and experiment with, the more it'll touch you. And music is a celebration of emotion. So, be it metal or be it goth rock, there's a real human experience to be found in those sounds.
So there you have it, folks. Go out and buy Tiny Tim's Greatest Hits.
And buy a couple of my books, please, because I got to pay the next mortgage.
Buy his books as well. Buy his books and spread the word to all your friends. Anybody who likes metal or any kind of great rock, he's got lots of cool books out there for you guys to read. They're very, very entertaining. You will not be able to put them down. So, thank you, Mr. John Wiederhorn. I appreciate all your time. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Lord Duncan's Rockin' World. And like I always say, rock on. As long as you rock on, the world will go on. You guys take care.
And thanks for having me on.
You got it, buddy.
It goes on and on and on. Goes on and on and on. It's on.